Our colleagues, Ken Delanian and Vaughn Hilliard, are covering this developing story since we've been on the air, and I want to share this update to their reporting. They report that Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino is considering leaving his job after this heated confrontation with Attorney General Pam Bondi over his frustration with how the Justice Department has handled the Jeffrey Epstein files. That's according to a person who's spoken with Bongino and a source familiar with Bongino and FBI Director Kash Patel's interactions with Bondi. Quote, Bongino is out of control, furious. The person who has spoken with the Deputy FBI Director said, quote, this destroyed his career. He's threatening to quit and torch Pam unless she is fired.
You are not just watching a routine update or another day at the Department of Justice. You are watching a country admit how fragile its legal system really is. Tonight, the headlines are clear. Attorney General Pam Bondi is facing a total institutional collapse. This isn't just a political disagreement. It is the exact moment the system has finally decided to push back against a Justice Department accused of being weaponized for a private agenda rather than public justice. It starts with a bombshell report from within the FBI that has sent shockwaves through Washington. Deputy Director Dan Bongino is reportedly considering leaving his job, and the reason is an absolute explosion behind closed doors. Sources familiar with the situation describe a heated, out-of-control confrontation between Bongino and Attorney General Pam Bondi. Bongino's frustration has reached a terminal breaking point, specifically over how the Justice Department has handled the sensitive and highly classified Jeffrey Epstein files. The situation is so dire that Bongino has reportedly told associates this conflict has effectively destroyed his career.
In the merger that took place,
which merger? You've listed many.
Involving American Express GBT. I understand that Brian Ballard, longtime backer and head of the law firm where you work, was instrumental in lobbying the Justice Department to drop that lawsuit. It was dismissed, so it's not subject to a court review. What conversation did you have with Mr. Ballard?
Senator Blumenthal, I cannot believe that you would accuse me of impropriety when you lied about your military service.
I am
you
not
lied.
asking
You admitted you lied
not
to be
accusing
elected
you
a
of
U.S. senator.
I'm
You
asking
lied.
you
How
about
dare you? I'm a
conversations
career prosecutor.
with Mr.
Don't you
Ballard,
ever challenge my integrity.
had
I have
apparently-
abided by every ethics standard. Do not question my ability to be fair and impartial as Attorney General, and anything
You'll
with
answer that
my
question to
former
another of my
firm,
colleagues.
Ballard Partners.
Thank you.
He is now threatening to not just quit, but to torch Pam Bondi's reputation unless she is removed from her post. This is an internal civil war within the leadership of American law enforcement. It is happening because the person at the top, the Attorney General herself, is being accused of stonewalling the very transparency that the American public was promised. While these internal fires burn, the external pressure is reaching a fever pitch. Bondi is under intense fire from both federal judges and a bipartisan group in Congress. They are slamming her handling of the Epstein records and other politically charged cases. One judge's order and a looming House inherent contempt plan have combined to create a narrative that is now impossible to ignore. Pam Bondi's legal strategy is blowing up in her face. People are tired of the mainstream media spin and corporate narratives. They want to know why the system is pushing back now. From the Epstein stonewalling to the public attacks that judges say are undermining fair trials, the walls are closing in. We are looking at a historic clash between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, and Pam Bondi is the central character in a drama she can no longer control. The question isn't just if she will survive the week, but whether the Department of Justice can survive her leadership. To understand why Pam Bondi is in a state of panic, you have to understand the specific legal hammer that is about to fall on her. This isn't just a standard congressional hearing or a strongly worded letter. This is about inherent contempt, one of the most aggressive and rarely used powers in the history of the United States Congress. On December 21, 2025, the game changed. Reports confirmed that lawmakers are no longer just asking for compliance. They are threatening to use this inherent power to fine Bondi every single day she fails to fully comply with subpoenas for the Jeffrey Epstein files. The trigger for this escalation was Bondi's decision to release only partial records. In the world of high-stakes transparency, Partial is often seen as a synonym for cover-up, especially when the public is demanding the full truth about the Epstein network. This move is being led by an unlikely but formidable bipartisan pair, Republican Thomas Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna. When you see a staunch constitutionalist like Massie and a progressive like Khanna drafting a joint resolution, you know the situation has transcended partisan bickering. They have drafted a contempt resolution specifically targeting Bondi for her continued stonewalling. But here is the detail that makes this a true bombshell. Inherent contempt allows Congress to bypass the court system entirely. Normally, criminal contempt requires the Department of Justice to prosecute the case. But since Pam Bondi controls the Department of Justice, she would never authorize a prosecution against herself. Inherent contempt solves this problem. It requires only a simple majority in the House of Representatives to trigger. The threat is clear and clinical. A daily financial penalty that continues until the full Epstein documents are released. This mechanism is designed to break the will of an official who believes they are untouchable behind the walls of the DOJ. By moving directly, Massie and Khanna are demonstrating that the legislative branch is done waiting for the executive branch to police itself. This is about power versus power. For Bondi, the calculation has changed from a political debate to a personal and professional liability that grows more expensive with every passing hour of silence. The system is no longer just watching, it is acting, and it is using a tool that hasn't been seen in this capacity for generations. While the threat of fines and subpoenas looms in Congress, a different kind of bombshell has dropped from within the very institution Pam Bondi is supposed to lead. This isn't just criticism from political opponents. This is a direct indictment from those who know the Department of Justice best. A group of former high-ranking Justice Department officials has taken the unprecedented step of signing a public letter that paints a devastating picture of the current state of the DOJ. Their core accusation is staggering. They claim that under Pam Bondi's leadership, the Civil Rights Division has been effectively destroyed. For decades, the Civil Rights Division has been viewed as the crown jewel of the Justice Department's mission to ensure equal protection under the law. But according to these former officials, that mission has been dismantled in service of a different master. The letter details a systematic pattern of dropping or reversing cases that were initiated during the Biden administration, cases that were focused on protecting voting rights, police accountability, and systemic discrimination. By abandoning these legal battles, critics argue that Bondi has signaled that the Department of Justice is no longer interested in defending the rights of everyday citizens if those rights conflict with the current political agenda. The accusation goes even further, charging that Bondi is not just retreating from civil rights but is actively using the division to pursue prosecutions that are purely politically driven. They allege that these legal actions are being taken specifically to benefit the president, transforming the DOJ into a legal arm of the White House. This is the definition of weaponization that the American public has feared. When the Department of Justice begins to pick and choose which laws to enforce based on whose name is on the ballot, the entire concept of the rule of law begins to crumble. This internal rot is the second major bombshell causing Bondi to panic. It's one thing to fight a Republican or a Democrat in a committee room. It's quite another to have the institutional memory of your own department testify against you. These former officials are providing the historical context for Bondi's aggressive tactics, framing them not as a necessary reform, but as a dangerous overreach. This public condemnation adds a layer of professional and moral weight to the congressional threats. It tells the American people that the collapse we are seeing isn't just about one person, it's about the integrity of the institution itself. As the Civil Rights Division is gutted, the shadow over the Epstein files grows even darker, leaving many to wonder what else is being sacrificed in the name of political service. While Pam Bondi fights a war of attrition with Congress, a third front has opened that is perhaps even more damaging to her legal authority, a direct rebellion from the federal bench. This isn't just political rhetoric. This is the sound of gavels coming down in direct opposition to her tactics. A federal judge has issued a staggering order that strikes at the very heart of how Bondi operates. The court has demanded that DOJ prosecutors explain, and more importantly, rein in, the Attorney General's aggressive public attacks on defendants. The specific case involves a migrant smuggling defendant and other targets aligned with the Trump administration's priorities, but the judge's concern goes far beyond a single case. The bombshell warning issued from the bench is that Bondi's public comments risk poisoning juries. In the American legal system, the right to a fair trial is a constitutional cornerstone protected by the Sixth Amendment. When a sitting attorney general uses her massive public platform to convict a defendant in the court of public opinion before they ever step into a courtroom, she is accused of undermining the very justice she is sworn to uphold. This judicial rebuke is a massive blow to Bondi's credibility. It paints a picture of a Justice Department that is more interested in winning a narrative than winning a legal argument. The judge's order essentially labels her rhetoric as a threat to the integrity of the trial process. For a career prosecutor like Bondi, being told by a federal judge that your public statements are jeopardizing constitutional rights is the ultimate professional humiliation. It is a signal that the courts will not be bystanders while the DOJ is used as a megaphone for political messaging. There is a profound irony in this judicial showdown. Not long ago, Bondi was publicly blasting lower court judges for dare blocking President Trump's executive orders. She had even suggested that the Supreme Court should step in to rein in these lower courts, accusing them of overreaching their authority. Now the tables have turned. The very confrontational posture she used to attack the judiciary is now backfiring. The system is pushing back, and it is doing so by using the law to check her power. As these rulings and contempt threats converge, the narrative of Bondi's collapse becomes impossible to dismiss. She is finding out the hard way that while you can attack a judge in a press conference, you cannot ignore their orders in a court of law. The judicial branch has officially entered the fight, and they are bringing the Constitution with them. To understand the true depth of the crisis facing Pam Bondi, we must look at the dark heart of the controversy, the Jeffrey Epstein files. This is not just a paperwork dispute or a bureaucratic delay. It is a fundamental test of the Attorney General's institutional credibility. The irony here is thick and unavoidable. For years, Bondi built her entire political identity on being a career prosecutor, a woman who promised to protect the vulnerable and punish the monster wherever they hid. Yet, as the highest law enforcement officer in the land, she now stands accused of being the primary obstacle to transparency for Jeffrey Epstein's victims. The contrast is as sharp as a razor. In viral clips from her Senate hearings and television appearances, Bondi uses fierce, uncompromising rhetoric, promising swift justice against predators. But that public fire turns to ice when it comes to the files that could implicate the powerful elite. Critics argue that her reluctance to release the full Epstein records, choosing instead to offer only partial and heavily redacted disclosures, exposes the selective justice that has become the hallmark of her tenure. Lawmakers and victims' advocates are now asking a simple but devastating question. If you are so committed to punishing monsters, why are you shielding the documents that could identify them? This selective application of justice is why the Epstein files have become the central character in the ongoing clash between Congress and the Department of Justice. It is not just about what is contained within those files. It is about what the refusal to release them reveals about the institution itself. By stonewalling these documents, Bondi is reinforcing the narrative that the Justice Department has been weaponized to protect political allies and powerful figures at the expense of the truth. For the victims who have waited decades for accountability, this is more than a legal strategy. It is a betrayal of the fundamental promise of equal justice under the law. This is the bombshell moment where the rhetoric finally meets reality. The system is no longer accepting the mainstream media spin or corporate narratives. It is pushing back on a perceived hypocrisy that threatens to destroy public trust in the Department of Justice. As more Epstein-related files continue to drop through alternative channels in late December 2025, Bondi's resistance looks less like a legitimate legal defense and more like a desperate attempt to contain a fire that has already spread beyond her control. The House's move toward inherent contempt is the direct result of this failure. When the law is used to hide rather than to reveal, the institutional response becomes inevitable, and Pam Bondi is now finding herself on the wrong side of that historic pushback. The collapse of Pam Bondi's legal strategy has created an impossible choice for the Republican Party, and the crack in the foundation is being led by one of their own. This is not a simple case of Democrats versus Republicans. When a staunch constitutionalist like Thomas Massie joins forces with Ro Khanna to draft a contempt resolution, it sends a clear message. The institutional fatigue over the Department of Justice has reached a bipartisan breaking point. For many GOP lawmakers, the situation has become a political exit ramp they are increasingly desperate to find. For years, the Republican base has been told that the Department of Justice was being weaponized against them. Now, that same rhetoric is being turned against Pam Bondi. Conservative leaders are facing a brutal reality. If they continue to defend Bondi's refusal to release the Epstein files, they risk looking like the very deep state actors they have spent years campaigning against. This is the GOP's impossible choice. Do they stay loyal to a hand-picked Attorney General, or do they stay loyal to the principle of institutional transparency? The political calculations are becoming visible. GOP senators are issuing carefully worded, ambiguous statements, signaling that they are looking for a way out. They understand that the public demand for the Epstein truth is a tidal wave that doesn't care about party lines. By protecting Bondi, they are essentially tethering their own political futures to her sinking ship. If the inherent contempt resolution advances to a full House vote, it will force every Republican member to go on the record. Are you for the full release of the files, or are you for the Attorney General who is blocking them? This is more than a short-term crisis. It is a stress test for the future of the party heading into 2026. The Massie-Kana alliance proves that the system is pushing back from within. When a Republican leader is the one dropping the bombshell on a Republican Attorney General, the narrative of partisan witch hunts falls apart. Bondi is no longer just a legal liability. She has become a central character in a clash that is forcing the GOP to redefine its relationship with the rule of law and the Justice Department. The walls are not just closing in from the outside, they are being rebuilt from the inside, and for Pam Bondi, the room is getting very small. The panic currently radiating from the Department of Justice is about much more than the personal or professional fate of Pam Bondi. What we are witnessing is the ultimate stress test of the American constitutional order. For decades, the public has been told that the guardrails of democracy, the independent judiciary, the oversight power of Congress, and the internal ethics of the executive branch would always hold. But tonight, those guardrails are appearing increasingly fragile as they face a presidency that critics describe as prioritizing personal power over the rule of law. The fundamental question at the heart of this crisis is whether Bondi's aggressive, Trump-aligned tactics can actually survive simultaneous pressure from all directions. This is no longer just a partisan skirmish. It is a full-scale clash between the three branches of government. When the system finally pushes back, it does so because the institutional memory of the country recognizes a fundamental threat to its mission. If an Attorney General can successfully stonewall subpoenas, refuse to release files on a predator like Epstein, and publicly attack defendants to poison juries without consequence, then the very concept of checks and balances becomes an empty slogan. This is why the bombshell moments we have tracked, the inherent contempt threat from Massie and Kana, the stinging rebukes from the federal bench, and the public condemnation from former DOJ officials, are so historic. They represent an institutional immune response to what is being characterized as the destruction of the Justice Department's integrity. By attempting to reclaim the power of inherent contempt, Congress is trying to bypass a department that it believes is no longer capable of policing itself. It is a survival move by the legislative branch to prevent the total weaponization of the legal system in service of a single individual. As we move into late December 2025, the significance of this moment will be studied by historians as the endgame for institutional accountability. We are in uncharted territory where the rules of governance are being rewritten in real time. The collapse is not just about one official facing a fine, it is about whether the idea of a government of laws, not of men, can survive this presidency. The pushback is coming from all directions simultaneously because the system itself is at a breaking point, and the Epstein files have become the catalyst for a fire that no amount of political spin can extinguish. The institutional walls are closing in, but for Pam Bondi, the most immediate threat may be personal and internal. We have to go back to the explosion inside the FBI that started this collapse. Deputy Director Dan Bongino is not just frustrated, he is reportedly out of control and furious. His career, by his own account, has been destroyed by the political handling of the Epstein files, and he is now a man with nothing left to lose. His threat to torch Pam Bondi unless she is fired is the ultimate sign that the loyalty which once held this administration's legal wing together has completely evaporated. When your own deputy FBI director is willing to burn the house down to expose the truth, you know the Attorney General's position is no longer tenable. As we look toward 2026, the implications of this showdown are historic. The inherent contempt resolution drafted by Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna is a weapon that, once drawn, cannot easily be sheathed. It represents a permanent shift in how Congress handles a defiant executive branch. If Bondi is fined daily, she becomes a living symbol of institutional failure, a sitting attorney general held in contempt by a bipartisan majority. This is the narrative that will define the upcoming political cycle, the clash between those who serve the law and those who seek to weaponize it. The fundamental question remains, can Pam Bondi's aggressive tactics survive a simultaneous pushback from the courts, the Congress, and her own internal department? History will record this moment as the point where the system finally responded to the destruction of the Justice Department's mission. The public is tired of corporate spin and the selective justice that protects powerful figures in the Epstein files while targeting political enemies. This story is about more than just one woman's career. It is a referendum on whether the United States will remain a country governed by transparency or one that slides into a kleptocracy where the rules only apply to the powerless. The bombshell has dropped, and the collapse is the system's way of trying to heal itself. This is why we built this platform, to bring you the real stories and the context that the mainstream media is too afraid to touch. If you are tired of being gaslit by officials who say one thing in front of a camera and do another behind closed doors, you have found your home. We will continue to follow every development of Bondi's collapse and the fight for the Epstein truth. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss the next bombshell. The truth belongs to you, the people, and it is time we demand it in full. Join us and stay ahead of the headlines.